Chapter 12. Child of a Foreign Land. "Rather lively today, isn't it?" Llewellyn said, although he seemed perfectly relaxed. He wasn't wearing his white doctor's outfit today. He was in men's clothing, although his pudgy silhouette and warm expression still gave him the appearance of an old lady. He made his way slowly but steadily along the thoroughfare, leaning on his cane. "Careful not to trip," Mau said, keeping a watchful eye out as she walked at his side. Roads weren't normally a problem for him, but this one was particularly busy, made even more so by the festival atmosphere. For an old man missing a kneecap, a stray bump from a passerby could be enough to send him sprawling. "Oh, I'm fine." "I'm sure you are. Just humor me." Normally, Mau might have spoken more bluntly to her father, but today she tried to mind her manners. There were other people present, namely Yao and Enen, along with the doctor who was forever getting angry at Mau. A soldier was with them too, as a bodyguard. What brought them outside the palace confines? A shopping trip. Only Yao had gone last time, but today all three of the girls were along. That was partly because there wasn't too much to carry, and partly because the medical office was too busy to spare all its doctors. The last shopping trip had demonstrated how tricky things could get with no physicians present. There was arguably one more reason as well. The person they would be purchasing medicine from was a foreigner. Mau's father was the most accomplished in the foreign tongue among the medical staff, while Mau, Enen, and the other doctor each knew at least a little. On this trip, Yao was just along for the ride. "We should have taken a carriage," Mau grumbled. "A carriage? With all these people around? We would only have been a nuisance," the woman said. He sounded cheerful, but Mau thought it was cruel to make an injured old man walk all this way. Other than that, she was very happy with the situation. She got to be with her father and see some uncommon medicine. Exciting. "Don't do anything unless we tell you to," said the other doctor. Call him Scary Doctor, glaring at Mau. Hey, she knew how to behave herself in public. She'd long had the feeling that he was keeping an eye on her, and since the incident with the frog-based salve the other day, his surveillance had only become more intense. Incidentally, she had finally started to remember his name just recently. It was Dr. Liu. "Sorry about this," the woman said, but he didn't contradict the other man. He was going to defer to Dr. Liu. Yao seemed to have a little more respect for Mau's father than before. As ever, Enen was doing whatever she could to help Yao, and the young mistress had recently been quite personable. "She was just sheltered." Yao was trying to look nonchalant, but Mau saw her eyes dart to the storefronts from time to time. She looked antsy, ready to run. She didn't seem used to the volume of people. Enen was watching just as closely as Mau, and although her face remained impassive, there was something hidden behind that deliberately blank expression. Her eyes sparkled like she'd spotted a baby squirrel and was enjoying the sight. Maybe Yao had been brought along this time because the doctors figured she hadn't gotten used to going shopping the first time. "Think she's really cut out for this?" Mau wondered. Enen was diligently minding Yao. "If I had to guess, I would say she's enjoying it." Well, that was better than having to force her kicking and screaming. While Yao was busy being distracted as they passed a candy crafter, the group arrived at their destination. It was a luxurious restaurant, one Mau had made use of before. It was amply supplied with private rooms where its typically rich clientele could have private conversations. "Awfully convenient, those rooms." Foreign products, even just medicine, were valuable. If you weren't careful when you went to pick them up, you can find yourself robbed on the way home. That explained the bodyguard, too. It being the middle of the day, there were quite a few female customers. At lunchtime, the restaurant sold light snacks, and the fresh steamed buns looked enticing. "This way, please." A server showed them to their room, where a foreign man with light hair waited. He was very hairy, except for his chin. He wore a thick mustache, but no beard. Woman entered the room, but when Mau and the others started to follow, the foreigner held up a hand. He and the woman conferred. The group was too far away to hear what they were saying, but Mau saw her father shake his head and look back at them. "He says only 3 people may enter." "What? 3 people?" That meant Mau and the other 2 assistants would have to wait outside. Obviously, the 2 doctors would be essential, and they would want the bodyguard with them just in case. In fact, he thinks we shouldn't have brought women at all, Dr. Liu said. I guess we should have had you accompany us when we were dealing with someone else. Mau Mau's shoulders slumped. Was she going to be condemned to wait in the hallway the entire time? Then Dr. Liu handed her a piece of paper. I'm sure you know how to handle a shopping trip. Could you pick up some other items for us while we're doing this? The paper contained a detailed list of the preferred sweets and treats of the doctors who hadn't been able to join them. The list was quite extensive, and Dr. Liu accompanied it with a substantial amount of change. If there's money left over, you can buy what you like with it. Craft candies, say. Be back here in a couple of hours.
Yes, sir,
Mau Mau said. Dr. Liu did nothing but get angry at her, yet he didn't neglect to provide for candy for them. He hadn't failed to notice Yao taking in the street stalls. You do know how to handle money, don't you? Yao asked Mau Mau, perhaps annoyed that she hadn't been entrusted with the cash.
Does she realize what she's saying?
Yao was as good as announcing that she herself hadn't known how to use money until recently. She seemed quite proud of her newly acquired knowledge.
Maybe they were hoping to teach her a thing or two about shopping by bringing her along,
Mau Mau thought. Behind her, Annen's eyes were shining, as if to say, Isn't my mistress the cutest? Mau Mau knew that hanging on to the money would only earn her more grumbling, but she wasn't entirely comfortable giving it to Yao. By process of elimination, she handed the list and the cash to Annen. Yao still seemed less than pleased, but she wasn't going to fight Annen having the purse strings. How about we start with the steamed buns? Annen suggested. She had the money, so it was only natural that she dictate the agenda. When Mau Mau stole a peek and saw the name of the shop, though, she frowned. Something the matter? Annen said.
That place is always sold out by lunchtime,
she said, pointing in the direction of the store. You heard her, Lady Yao. Annen really was quick on the uptake. What? Heard what? Yao was still clueless as Mau Mau grabbed one of her hands and Annen grabbed the other. They both started to pull. If they sell out, we're the ones who will get in trouble, Annen said. Yao flinched. Let's hurry then. Hand in hand, the three of them sprinted for the buns for all they were worth. If they'd pictured a pleasant afternoon wandering the main street together, they were much mistaken. At last they stood in the shade of a willow tree, Mau Mau and Yao and Annen, their breath heaving.
Doctors must earn a pretty nice salary,
Mau Mau said, her tone more than a little bitter as she looked at the mountain of treats in pretty packages.
There's a lot of fresh-made stuff here. Think they'll be able to eat it all before it goes stale?
They'd been to what felt like every place in town. Dr. Liu said they could spend whatever was left over. But was there anything left over? Yao wheezed. She wasn't used to running and was so spent she couldn't speak. Annen, ever attentive, bought her some juice from a nearby shop. All the snacks they had been instructed to purchase had come from well-known establishments. Mau Mau recognized the number of the treats served at the Verdigrease house as well. Dr. Liu had probably given Mau Mau the money because he knew she would be acquainted with many of the stores. I really think this should be enough, Annen said, scanning the piece of paper. There was one more name on the list.
Oh, that place.
Mau Mau's shoulders slumped. It wasn't exactly close, and she didn't feel like walking that far.
They've probably still got stock, and we've got an hour yet.
She glanced at Yao, who appeared rejuvenated by the juice. I'm good to go, she said. Mau Mau and Annen looked at each other, both cocking their heads, wondering what to do. May I ask what you're doing, Annen? You two seem to signal each other a lot these days, Yao said. I simply wouldn't want you to overexert yourself, Lady Yao, Annen said. Well, that's too bad, because I'm going. I'm going, and that's final. Very well. Annen remained unfazed, but inside she was no doubt marveling at how adorable her mistress was when she was trying to put on a brave face. From behind, Mau Mau could see that Annen's shapely tush was quivering with delight. Mau Mau guided them along.
This shop's on a side street a little off the main road.
It was a nuisance having her arms full of packages. Then again, Yao, still trying to prove she was up to these kind of things, had insisted on carrying more of the baggage than anyone. At least Mau Mau had it better than her. I do admire her refusal to be beaten, she thought. There were plenty of people out there who were content to lord it over others simply because they happened to have been born well. At least Yao wasn't like that. Mao Mao suspected it was the same facet of her personality that had driven her to apply to become a medical assistant when she took the court ladies' exam. Strictly speaking, the shop for which they were heading was not a snack place. It was more a supplier of exotic ingredients. Any physician who mixed up medicines could also do a little cooking, and this place specialized in unusual condiments and flavorings. The town felt very different once they got off the main road. They saw more commoners' dwellings as they wove their way between shops. A cat yawned in the shade of a tree, while small children in bibs tried to get its attention with a bobbing foxtail. There were women doing laundry in the canal, and a dog tied up watching a chicken in a cage who seemed likely to be that evening's dinner.
This is where the shop is?
Yao asked, uneasy. In answer, Mao Mao pointed at a small sign. It bore the name of the last place on their list. Yao was visibly relieved.
They should set up shops somewhere more, reputable. The closer you are to the main street, the higher the taxes,
Mao Mao said. The better your location, the more people went by your shop, and the more money the taxman figured he could squeeze out of you.
Come on, let's wrap up this list, she said.
She started for the store, but suddenly NN stopped.
What's wrong? Mao Mao asked.
NN pointed to the far side of the canal, where they saw a gaggle of children surrounding a little girl. Mao Mao wondered if they were playing a game, but no, it didn't quite seem like it. What was going on here? While she was still trying to figure it out, she saw someone go running across the small bridge over the canal. It was Yao.
"What are you doing?"
she yelled, startling the children.
"You're bullying that poor girl."
Her shouting sent the kids scattering.
She's so, how should I put this? Young,
Mao Mao thought, but trotted after her just the same. There was only one child standing in front of Yao now, the girl who'd been surrounded by the others. The victim of the bullying, if Yao was right.
Huh?
Yao said, puzzled.
Do you see this girl?
Mao Mao looked the child in the face, and she was puzzled too.
It looked like she's from a foreign land,
NN said. The girl's clothes were in typical Li style, but her facial features weren't the typical Li look. Mao Mao took her to be somewhat less than 10 years old. Her hair and eyes were dark, but her skin was fairer and ruddier than their own. She had a lovely face, with perfectly positioned eyes and pronounced eyebrows.
Her skin reminds me of Empress Gyokyo's.
She might be of mixed parentage then, but Mao Mao could see why NN had assumed she was foreign-born. There were markings around her eyes. That was extremely unusual in Li, since here tattoos were normally imposed on criminals. Few people would voluntarily get them, making Mao Mao and her freckles a notable exception to the rule. This wasn't the mark of any crime, however. It looked more like a ward or charm. A red, vine-like pattern.
"Are you all right?"
Yao asked. But the girl only looked at her with a confused expression. Yao was dismayed. "I guess you don't understand me," she said. If only they could get a word out of her, but the child didn't say anything.
"I don't think she can talk,"
said one of the kids Yao had sent running. "She looked like she was lost, so we asked her where she was from, but she wouldn't say a word. We all tried asking her together, but I don't think she has a voice." With that, the child ran off again. Yao had been so willing to jump right in, but now she seemed at a loss for what to do.
"Don't look at me,"
Mao Mao thought. They were confronted with a mute child who was from another country, so they couldn't have communicated even if she could speak.
"What do we do?"
Yao asked.
"That's what I'd like to know."
Human beings are creatures that communicate using language. Being deprived of that ability is inconvenient, to say the least, as Mao Mao and the others were discovering. Yao crouched in front of the little girl.
"Okay, your name. What's your name?"
she ventured. The girl continued to stare back, sweet but uncomprehending. She said nothing, but she appeared to be listening to Yao, trying to understand her, so apparently she could hear.
"If she could say something, we might at least be able to figure out what country she's from."
But no such luck. The child made not a peep. Having gotten herself into this, Yao was bent on at least figuring out where the child was from, but she was looking less and less hopeful. She stole the occasional glance back at Mao Mao and NN, but NN only watched, making no move to help her mistress.
"She could stand to lend a hand,"
Mao Mao thought. Early on, she'd taken NN to be Yao's faithful servant, but over time, she had come to see it was more complex than that. Yes, Yao was very important to Enen, and yes, Enen served her impeccably, but
there's something a little twisted about it.
Such was Mau Mau's conclusion. Sometimes, when someone was just too adorable, it left you wanting to tease them a bit. But it wasn't quite that either. However you described it, it left Enen watching with distinct gratification as Yao flailed. They were going to run out of time if this went on much longer, so Mau Mau was about to step in and try to help, but she was preempted by Enen. "Lady Yao, I don't think she speaks our language. Let me try instead," she said. "Yes, please," Yao said, relieved. She was obviously grateful for the help. Maybe she wouldn't have felt quite so glad if she'd realized Enen had been savoring the sight of her struggle until that moment.
Ignorance is what again?
Mau Mau thought, watching the two of them from under lidded eyes. Enen asked the child her name in a foreign language. Of course, there were a lot of foreign languages. Mau Mau spoke a smattering of Shaonese and could read and write a few simple words in the tongues of places farther west, but she was self-taught and had no confidence in her pronunciation. Enen, by her own admission, didn't speak much more than Mau Mau, so it was slow work talking to the girl. Her efforts, however, made the child's eyes widen. She started to bounce up and down. Something, whatever it was, had gotten through. "She must be from Shao," Enen said. Aileen had golden hair and blue eyes, but that wasn't true of everyone from the region. Dark hair and eye colors were more likely to be passed down from parents to children, making it only natural that black and brown be the most common.
"I guess she understood you, but we still don't know her name,"
Yao said. The little girl still hadn't spoken a word. She did, however, touch her throat and proceed to make an X shape with her hands in front of her neck.
"I think that means she can't speak,"
Mau Mau said. Then she ventured a few words in Shaonese.
"You can't talk?"
The girl made a circle with her hands this time, a sign of approval. Mau Mau picked up a branch that was lying on the ground and scratched a few characters in the dust to demonstrate what she had in mind. Then she gave the branch to the girl.
"Can you write your name?"
she asked. The girl shook her head. Instead, she drew a picture. Some kind of flower, although exactly what kind was hard to tell.
"Doesn't look like she knows how to write either,"
Mau Mau remarked.
"So what do we do?"
Yao asked.
"You tell me,"
Mau Mau said. Yao was the one who'd gone barreling into the situation. Now she looked like she felt awkward indeed. The girl continued drawing busily.
"What's this?"
Mau Mau said. The picture seemed to depict some sort of patterned vessel.
"Do you think it's food?"
Yao volunteered.
"I wonder what it's supposed to signify,"
Enen said. The girl tapped the picture with her stick.
"Maybe she's looking for whatever it is,"
Yao said. When Enen communicated the question to the child in her stilted Shaonese, she was rewarded with a big circle. The girl held out her hand to them. In her palm was a single small piece of gold. "Whoa, whoa," Mau Mau said. There wasn't much of it, but it was gold. Not the sort of thing to go around showing to just anybody. She pressed the girl's hand closed again.
"I guess she's got money and wants to go shopping."
"Sounds right to me," Enen said.
"Yeah,"
Yao agreed.
"But so far we have no idea what she wants to go shopping for,"
Mau Mau said. She looked at the picture and asked,
"You want a vessel like this?"
The girl shook her head. This would have been easier if she was a better artist.
Maybe at least as good as Cho,
Mau Mau thought. She dismissed the idea. That sort of thinking wasn't going to get them anywhere. The girl's picture was actually pretty good, considering how young she was.
"I think it looks like food of some kind. Any clues as to what?"
Mau Mau said. But they weren't making any headway. The little girl looked toward the canal, where the children Yao had scattered had started playing down by the water. They were fishing something up. Crayfish, Mau Mau realized. They could be quite tasty if you cleaned the mud off and cooked them. The girl, however, was shaking her head as if to say that crayfish were not her objective.
"I don't think we can do any more good here. Why don't we take her back with us? The medical officers speak better Shaonese than we do," Mau Mau said.
"That's true," agreed Yao, who was all out of ideas. "Come on, let's go together," she said, and took the girl's hand. The child looked confused, so Mau Mau explained,
"We'll take you to people who can talk better than us."
The girl shook her head again. She was obviously eager to communicate something, but with her unable to speak, it just wasn't getting across. She could only scratch pictures in the dirt. Does that look like a steamed bun to you? Enen said.
Now that you mention it, it sort of does.
It was hard to tell. The picture was just kind of a circle. Mau Mau and the others cocked their heads and peered at it. The girl cocked her head too, as if she was saying, "You still don't understand?"
Maybe it's a fruit,
Mau Mau said. Yeah, like an apple, said Yao. It was true that the circle had what looked like a stem and leaf attached to it. The other items sort of looked like fruits and snacks if you thought of them that way. Wait, Enen said. Do you want a snack? The girl waved her arms vigorously. This appeared to be the right answer. Mau Mau spread out the cloth bundles, showing the girl the various treats they'd purchased that afternoon. But the child shook her head at each one.
I think we've got pretty much everything you can buy,
Mau Mau said. Baked treats, steamed treats, sweet things, savory things. It had been a long list.
About the only thing in town we haven't gotten yet is from that last place on the list.
She pointed at the shop and the girl began to bounce.
Huh?
They couldn't be sure they were on the right track, but they managed to communicate that they were going to a shop selling treats. The girl started bouncing even faster.
Does she want us to take her with us?
That seemed to be the message. There was something she wanted at that shop. Mau Mau and the rest of the little troop crossed the bridge and headed for the place in question, a folkhouse-style building with a sign outside. It was shut up tight and looked dark and somehow sad. The little girl must not have known that this was the place. She couldn't read the sign, after all.
This place sells snacks?
Asked a deeply skeptical Yao.
Strictly speaking, it's not a snack shop. It's a pretty interesting place,
Mau Mau said. She opened the door with a clatter. They discovered there was another customer there, along with the pudgy shop owner. The customer seemed to be a woman, but a very tall one, with noticeably tanned skin. Mau Mau wasn't good at guessing foreigners' ages, but she took the woman to be at least in her mid-30s.
Is she a foreigner?
Mau Mau wondered. Jazgul, the woman said.
Jazgul?
Mau Mau didn't know what the word meant. The little girl, however, went rushing over to the woman. My goodness, wherever did you go? The woman asked in Shawanese. Jazgul, it appeared, was the girl's name. It seemed much harder to pronounce than a name like Aileen, even though both were from the same language.
So is that her guardian? Maybe her mother or something?
Mau Mau said. Seems like a safe guess, even though they don't look much alike, Enen said. All three of them felt spent. Is this what all the stress had been for? Jazgul was communicating something to the woman, pointing at Mau Mau and the others. Perhaps it is you who saw Jazgul safely here? The woman asked them. She had an accent, but she was perfectly understandable. She was by the canal over there. She seemed to want snacks, Yao said. Ah, so that's what happened. In short, Jazgul's companion had been here, but they'd gotten separated, and the girl hadn't known which shop was which. Ironic that it was so close. I must apologize. This girl was adamant on going out there. While the woman chatted, the shopkeeper rifled through the shelves, looking for whatever she had ordered. Oh, I know this place, Enen said when she saw the logo on some wrapping paper. The paper wasn't very high quality, but it was good enough for its purpose.
What's the story? Mau Mau said.
Nothing really. I just realized this place has dealings with a mansion. Presumably meaning Yao's home. Here we are. This is all we've got in stock at the moment. That all right? The shopkeeper exclaimed. Ah! Yao exclaimed when she saw what he was holding. A bundle of frogs, stretched, dried, and packed together like a little bouquet. Maybe the girl had seen the kids catching crayfish and gotten excited, thinking they were after frogs. Hence her disappointment.
There are so many different kinds of frogs, though,
Mau Mau thought. If they were being used for some fancy person's snack, they wouldn't be like a frog you could just pick off the street.
Frogs.
The word teased at something in a corner of Mau Mau's memory. A decent-sized thing that one might call a frog. She shook her head. It had been such a shock that it still came unbidden into her mind at times. What are those for? Yao asked.
Probably a nice, cool summer snack,
Mau Mau thought. The fat on the reproductive organs in certain female frogs that lived out in the countryside was gooey and delicious, as Yao should have known very well.
I guess she's better off being in the dark.
And there you had it. So Outlanders really do eat snakes and frogs, Yao whispered to Enen. Yes, so it would seem, Enen replied, innocent as a dove. As far as Mau Mau was concerned, though, there was a problem with what the Outlanders were buying at the moment. She started. The frogs were one thing, but they'd also bought up the store supply of pomegranates, candied with rock sugar, and dried figs.
Is it possible we could ask you to just leave a few figs for us?
That was one of the items on their list. Oh, I'm sorry. How many do you need? The woman said. Mau Mau named a quantity, and the woman gladly agreed. Figs are in season now. We can get 'em for you whenever you want. Pomegranates? Well, maybe it's a little early yet, the shopkeeper said. Thank you very much, the woman said. Jazgul bowed her head politely as well. Mau Mau squinted at the woman's purchases.
Kind of wish I could ask about them.
She didn't, though, both because it would be sticking her nose where it might not be welcome, and because she wasn't sure they shared enough language to make the conversation possible. The woman bundled up her items, then stood in front of Mau Mau and the others. Please accept this small token, she said, and held out white pieces of cloth, one for each of them, for taking such care of Jazgul. Then the foreign customers left the shop. Mau Mau touched the fabric and exclaimed, Excuse me! Before she could pursue the woman, though, the shopkeeper said, Your items are ready. By the time they had collected their purchases and left the shop, the two foreigners were nowhere to be seen. What's got you so worked up? Yao asked. This cloth, Mau Mau said, giving it a gentle flap. It looked plain and white, but the corners were worked with elaborate embroidery of grass and trees.
It's cool to the touch. I would assume it's silk.
Yes, it is. What about it? Easy for the girl from a lap of luxury to say. Mau Mau spread her hands and shook her head in a gesture of exasperation. Lady Yao, a piece of silk is a very generous reward for something as simple as helping a lost child, at least to us ordinary people.
Yes, of course. I knew that.
All right. Yao was pretty cute. Enen was flashing Mau Mau a thumbs up from where Yao couldn't see. So these Outlanders could buy up a store's stock and hand out silk like candy.
We're dealing with some rich folk here.
Mau Mau sighed, thinking maybe she should have sucked up to them a little more. At that moment, a bell rang signaling the hour. The time! All three of them exclaimed. It was long past when they were supposed to be back. They ended up running as fast as they could. Again.